I hosted a lavish Thanksgiving dinner and invited my parents and siblings, but no one came. They all gathered somewhere else without me. I sat alone, eating in silence, fighting back tears of humiliation. Then, my grandfather arrived and quietly handed me an envelope. I opened it, and what I discovered left me completely shocked. I invited my parents and siblings to a fancy Thanksgiving dinner, but that day, not a single one of them showed up. They abandoned me, gathering elsewhere. I sat there, eating in tears and humiliation. Then, my grandpa walked in, placed an envelope in my hand, and the truth inside left me stunned. Hello, my name is Adam. I'm 29 years old and work as a financial analyst in Omaha, Nebraska. It's a quiet city in the heart of America, where roads stretch through endless cornfields and autumn winds carry a crisp chill. Unlike the busy chaos of New York or the dazzling allure of Los Angeles, Omaha has the calm of the Midwest, where people still greet each other and know their neighbors. Yet, for me, Omaha never truly felt like home. I grew up here, in what I call my foster family. But since childhood, I've always felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. I don't clearly remember how I was adopted. The stories of that day were only recounted through the cold whispers of my foster mother, Ellen, when she was displeased with me. "We saved you from a worthless life," she'd often say, implying I owed her everything. I was adopted as an infant, not even 3 months old. My foster parents, Robert and Ellen, were well off, living in a spacious 2-story house in the Omaha suburbs with a green lawn and a white picket fence. They had 2 biological children, Eric, 2 years younger, and Hannah, 5 years my junior. On paper, I was part of this family, but in their hearts, I was just a faint shadow. From a young age, I noticed I was different. It wasn't just that my dark brown hair or blue eyes didn't resemble anyone else's, though that did make me wonder about my origins. The difference was how they treated me. During parent-teacher conferences, my foster mother would introduce Eric and Hannah as her son and daughter. But when it came to me, she'd simply say, "This is Adam." Nothing more, nothing less. The word son seemed too lavish for me. I remember one time, when I was about 7, standing in the corner during a family Christmas party. Everyone was gathered, taking photos in front of a twinkling Christmas tree. But when I tried to join, Hannah pushed me away. "You don't need to be here," she said, as if I were an uninvited guest. My foster mother just smiled, patted Hannah's head, and kept snapping photos. I stood there, watching the flickering lights, feeling like the whole world was laughing and celebrating while I was left on the sidelines. All my efforts to be acknowledged were in vain. I excelled in school, always at the top of my class, bringing home report cards and certificates that covered the fridge. I helped my foster mother wash dishes, sweep the yard, even learn to fold clothes the way she liked, but all I got were cold nods or a curt, "Thank you." Once, I overheard her talking to my foster father in the kitchen when they thought I was asleep. "He does it because he knows he has to. We gave him a home. He owes us." Those words cut like a knife into my tender heart. I wasn't their son. I was an obligation. But there was one person in this family who made me feel like I truly existed. My grandfather, Henry. He lived on a small farm 2 hours from Omaha, where cornfields stretched endlessly and the night sky sparkled with stars. Every summer, when school was out, I was sent to stay with him. Those were the only months I felt alive, truly loved. Grandpa never called me Adam in a dry, detached way. To him, I was kiddo or my dear boy. He taught me how to fix cars in his garage, thick with the smell of motor oil, and showed me how to grow tomatoes in his garden. On quiet evenings, he'd sit on the porch, strumming folk tunes on his old guitar while I sang along, even though my voice was far from impressive. Grandpa was the only one who truly saw me. When I was 12, I sat with him on the porch swing, watching a fiery red sunset. I blurted out, "Grandpa, why don't Mom and Dad love me?" He stopped strumming, resting his hand on my shoulder. His eyes, etched with the wrinkles of time, looked at me for a long moment. "Adam," he said, his voice deep and warm, "you're the best thing that family doesn't know how to cherish. Don't let your kindness depend on how they treat you. You're worth so much more than that." Those words seared into my mind, a small flame flickering through my darkest days. I also remember another time when Grandpa took me out to the field behind his farm. As we sat watching the sunset, he suddenly asked, "Do you ever think about your real mother?" The question stunned me. I hadn't thought much about her. My foster mother always said my biological mother was irresponsible and that I shouldn't bother with her. But Grandpa's eyes, filled with mystery and concern, made my heart race. "I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling. "I don't think she wanted me." Grandpa took my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Never think that, Adam. There are stories you don't know yet. But one day it'll all make sense." Those vague words planted a seed of curiosity in me, a sense that my life might hold a secret bigger than I could imagine. But the warmth of those summers with Grandpa couldn't erase the loneliness inside me. Eric always saw me as a rival, not worth his attention. He'd mock me in front of his friends, calling me the stray when he thought no one could hear. Hannah was different. She wasn't openly cruel, but her eyes always held a distance, as if I were a stranger living under the same roof. I tried not to let it break me. I told myself that if I worked harder, studied better, behaved perfectly, one day they'd see me differently. But deep down, I knew that hope was as fragile as a thread. Every morning, I woke up in my small attic room, the only one in the house without a big window overlooking the front yard. Eric and Hannah had spacious rooms decorated with posters and toys, while mine had just a single bed, an old desk, and a flickering desk lamp. I didn't complain. I'd learned that complaining only made my foster mother frown and say, "You should be grateful you have a place to sleep." But every time I walked down the stairs, I felt like a guest in my own home. There's one memory I'll never forget. When I was 14, the family threw a birthday party for Hannah. The living room was filled with cake, balloons, and laughter. I'd spent a week making a leather bracelet for her, hoping she'd like it. I wrapped it carefully in a small box, tied it with a red ribbon, and placed it on the gift table. When Hannah opened it, she glanced at the bracelet, then set it aside to open more expensive gifts. A new iPod from our parents, a pair of shoes for Eric. My foster mother didn't even notice my gift. I stood in the corner, feeling like my heart was being crushed. After the party, I found the bracelet in the trash, mixed with crumpled wrapping paper. I picked it up, cleaned it off, and tucked it away in my personal box. That was the last time I tried giving a gift to anyone in the family. Another painful memory came when I was 16. I decided to do something to make my foster father proud. Robert was a stern man, always busy with his real estate business. He rarely spoke to me, but I'd heard him brag to friends about fixing the family's old truck. I thought if I could do something similar, he'd see me differently. I snuck into the garage with the tools Grandpa had left me from a previous summer. Eric's old bike with a flat front tire sat in the corner. I spent hours oiling it, tightening bolts, trying to make it rideable again. When my foster father came home, I excitedly pulled him to the garage to show him, but he just glanced at it and said, "Don't touch Eric's stuff. It's not yours." I stood there, frozen, feeling like the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. I wanted to explain that I was just trying to help, but the words stuck in my throat. I went back to my room, shut the door and cried alone. My childhood passed like that, a mix of warm summers with Grandpa and cold winters in a grand but loveless house. I learned to hide my emotions, to smile even when my heart was breaking. I told myself that one day I'd find where I truly belonged. But back then, I didn't know that journey would lead me to a truth more painful than anything I'd ever experienced. As I turned 18, the opportunity to leave Omaha came like an escape hatch. I received a full scholarship to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, just over an hour's drive from home. It wasn't a great distance, but to me, it felt like a doorway to a new world. On the day I packed my bags, my foster mother, Ellen, stood at my bedroom door, arms crossed, her eyes as cold as ever. "Take care of yourself," she said, her voice flat, like she was addressing a tenant. My foster father, Robert, merely nodded, his eyes glued to his newspaper. I dragged my suitcase out of the house, my heart heavy, but flickering with a spark of hope. Maybe by leaving, I'd find where I truly belonged. University was a breath of fresh air. In Lincoln, no one knew me as the adopted kid or the outsider. I threw myself into my studies, choosing finance because I knew I was good with numbers and analysis. Late nights in the library, essays stretching dozens of pages, presentations in front of the class. They were all chances to prove my worth, not to my foster family, but to myself. I worked part-time at a coffee shop near campus, saving every penny so I wouldn't have to ask my foster parents for money. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, to show that I didn't need their validation to succeed. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling of being adrift clung to me. Lying in my dorm bed at night, listening to my roommates snoring, I often thought about my family. I wondered if they ever thought of me, if they were ever proud of how far I'd come. I wrote handwritten letters home, sharing small victories like getting an A in macroeconomics or being chosen as a teaching assistant. But those letters only received brief email replies from my foster mother. "Good job, Adam. Keep it up." Nothing more, nothing less. I saved those emails in a separate folder on my computer as a way to comfort myself that at least they responded. Every summer, I returned to my grandfather's farm instead of the house in Omaha. Those days remained a balm for my soul. Grandpa was older now, his hair snow-white, his back slightly hunched, but his eyes still lit up whenever he saw me. He taught me new songs on his old guitar, told me stories of his youthful adventures, and sometimes he'd repeat the words that haunted me. "One day, Adam, you'll know the truth." I asked what he meant, but he'd only smile, pat my shoulder and say, "Time will tell." I didn't dare press further, but those words grew like a mysterious seed in my heart. In my final year of college, I graduated with honors, top of my finance class. At the commencement ceremony, I stood on stage, accepting my diploma with a radiant smile. But inside I felt hollow. I had sent invitations to my foster parents, even called them directly to invite them. "We're very busy, Adam," my foster mother said over the phone, her voice flat. "But congratulations." I looked out at the audience where other families were clapping, hugging, and taking photos. Only Grandpa was there, seated in the back row, wearing an old but neatly pressed suit. When I stepped off the stage, he hugged me so tightly I could feel the warmth of his chest. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he whispered. I smiled, but tears silently fell. It was the first time I'd cried in front of him. After graduation, I received a job offer from a financial firm in Omaha. I decided to return, not for my foster family, but to be near Grandpa. The years working in Omaha after graduation were a time of building a new version of myself. I worked tirelessly, staying late at the office, poring over financial reports, as if they held the key to a new life. My colleagues started calling me Iron Adam, because I rarely rested or complained. But they didn't know that every night when I returned to my small apartment, I sat in the dark, listening to the folk songs Grandpa used to play, wondering if I was living the right way. As my career stabilized, my income grew. I began sending money to my foster parents each month, not because they asked, but because I thought it was a way to repay them. But whenever I called to check in, my foster mother would only say things like, "Thank you, but you don't have to do that." Eric and Hannah, now adults, still leaned on our parents. Eric had dropped out of college and spent his days hanging out with friends, while Hannah was obsessed with shopping and posting on social media. I didn't resent them. I just hoped that one day they'd see me as part of the family. 6 years later, I was promoted to lead analyst at the company. It was a major milestone, not just for the pay raise, but because I felt closer to my dream, building a life I could be proud of. Yet, no matter how successful I became, I couldn't fill the void in my heart. I longed for a family, not the grand house in Omaha's suburbs, but a place where I truly belonged. Then, an idea struck me. A Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving is a time for people to gather, to give thanks for the good things in life. I thought that if I hosted a perfect dinner and invited the whole family, maybe they'd see me as more than Adam, the adopted kid. Maybe this time, they'd look at me with warmer eyes. I spent weeks preparing. I chose an upscale restaurant in downtown Omaha with tables draped in white silk and flickering candlelight. I reserved a table for 6. My foster parents, Eric, Hannah, Grandpa, and me. I handwritten invitations on thick paper with gold ink, pouring my heart into each one. "Dear Mom, I hope you'll come to share the joy of this holiday with me," I wrote in the card to my foster mother. I sent personal texts to Eric and Hannah, asking them to make time for dinner. I even called my foster father, saying how much I looked forward to seeing everyone. "I'll check my schedule," he said, his voice flat. I didn't let it discourage me. I pre-ordered the food: roast turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, all the traditional dishes I knew they liked. Inside, a flame of hope burned brightly. Maybe this time they'll come, I told myself, though my heart trembled with fear. On Thanksgiving Day, I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment, adjusting my tie and smoothing out the navy suit I'd carefully chosen. I looked into my own eyes in the reflection. Those deep blue eyes my foster mother once said didn't look like anyone else's in the family. I told myself. Today will be different. Today they'll see me. I arrived at the restaurant early, at 5 p.m., as the sunset bathed Omaha's streets in golden light. The manager, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, led me to the table I'd reserved. The setup was perfect. Crisp white tablecloth, 6 gleaming silver place settings, and candles casting a soft orange glow. I checked everything, from the folded napkins to the small vase of flowers at the center. "Your family must be a lively bunch," the waitress said, smiling. I nodded, trying to hide the anxiety churning in my stomach. "Yeah, I hope so." I sat down, glancing at my watch. 6 p.m., the appointed time. The restaurant began to fill up, other families arriving, their laughter and chatter like a cheerful melody. I checked my phone. No messages, no calls. They might be on their way, I reassured myself, though my heart started pounding with unease. I texted Hannah. "Are you here yet?" "I'm waiting at the restaurant." No reply. I tried calling Eric, but it rang endlessly before going to voicemail. "Hey, Eric, I'm at the restaurant. Is everyone coming soon?" I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. No one answered. By 6:30, I felt a burning sensation at the back of my neck. The tables around me were full. A family at the next table laughed loudly as their young child spilled sauce on their shirt. An elderly couple held hands, their eyes brimming with love. I stared at my empty table, the 6 chairs sitting silently, as if mocking me. I called my foster mother, my hands trembling as I dialed. The phone rang 5 times before she picked up. "Adam," her voice cut through me like ice. "Your father's not feeling well, and we've already eaten here. You'll manage, right?" In the background, I heard Hannah's laughter, the clink of dishes, Eric saying something about a football game. They were at home, gathered together as they always were, as if I'd never existed. "Yeah, I'll manage," I replied, my voice catching as if someone were squeezing my throat. I hung up, set the phone on the table, and stared at the flickering candles. Their light reflected off the wine glass, but it didn't warm me. I felt like the whole world was laughing and celebrating while I was left behind once again, in the loneliness I'd spent years trying to escape. I called the waitress over and asked for a small portion of turkey and mashed potatoes. "Just you tonight?" she asked, her voice gentle but tinged with pity. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just me." The food was placed before me, the aroma of roasted turkey and herbs making my stomach rumble, but every bite felt like it was stuck in my throat. I looked at the empty chair where my foster mother was supposed to sit, the ones for my foster father, Eric, and Hannah. I imagined them laughing at home, eating the dishes I'd chosen, but without me. Tears welled up, but I bit my lip hard, refusing to let them fall. I'd cried enough during my childhood. I told myself I was stronger than this. But the truth was, I wasn't strong. I was just a 29-year-old man sitting alone in a fancy restaurant, trying to cling to a dream that had shattered long ago. I wondered what I'd done wrong. I'd studied hard, worked tirelessly, sent the money, planned this dinner with all my heart, so why didn't they choose me? I stared at the plate of turkey, now cold, and felt like I was eating my own pain. The waitress passed by, her eyes full of sympathy. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, but I knew I wasn't. I'd never been okay. I reached for my phone, intending to call Grandpa. He was the one person I knew would never abandon me. But before I could dial, the restaurant door opened. A gust of cold autumn air rushed in, carrying the scent of fall. I looked up, and my heart seemed to stop. Grandpa walked in, wearing his old wool coat, his white hair glinting under the lights. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on me, and that familiar smile spread across his face. "Sorry I'm late, kiddo," he said, his voice as warm as those summer evenings at the farm. He sat down across from me, placing his frail hands on the table and grasping mine. His hands trembled slightly, but their warmth pulled me back from the edge of an abyss. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I thought you weren't coming either." He shook his head, his eyes filled with love, but also a trace of indescribable sadness. "I'd never leave you alone, Adam. Never." He squeezed my hand, and then his voice turned serious, as if he were about to say something more important than anything in my life. "Adam," he said, looking straight into my eyes, "have you ever wondered why I've always loved you more than anyone else? His question hit me like a bolt of lightning striking my chest. I stared at him, speechless, feeling like time had stopped. The candles on the table still flickered, but the world around me seemed to shrink, leaving just me and Grandpa. I knew this question wasn't simple. It carried a secret, a truth he'd kept hidden for years. "Why, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice trembling. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. He looked out the window where the streetlights glowed faintly in the night. "Adam," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "there are things I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I waited for the right moment. And maybe that moment is now." He paused, his eyes returning to me, filled with determination. "You're not just my grandson. You're part of a story that both you and I have been caught up in." My heart pounded. I felt like I was standing before a door, and Grandpa held the key. "What story, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled an old yellowed envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the table, sliding it toward me. "Open it, Adam," he said. "But before you do, promise me one thing. No matter how painful the truth is, you won't let it destroy who you are." I looked at the envelope, my hands shaking as I touched it. I didn't know what was inside, but I felt its weight. Not the weight of paper, but of the years I'd lived, of the questions I'd never dared to face. I looked at Grandpa, and in his eyes, I saw both love and fear. "Grandpa," I said, my voice breaking, "I'm ready." Grandpa nodded slowly, his gaze piercing through me as if he were looking back at years long gone that I had never known. The restaurant around us buzzed with laughter and conversation, but for me, the world had narrowed to just me, Grandpa, and the weathered envelope on the table. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my heart pounded, as if it might burst. I opened the envelope carefully, as if it were something fragile. Inside was a faded photograph, a handwritten letter, and a business card. I picked up the photo first. It showed a young woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, identical to mine. She was smiling, but her smile carried an indescribable sadness. I looked at Grandpa, my brows furrowing. "Who is this, Grandpa?" He took a long breath, as if gathering the courage to tell a story he'd kept buried for too long. "Adam?" he began, his voice low and deliberate. "The woman in that photo is your biological mother." I felt the blood in my veins stop flowing. I looked back at the photo, my hands trembling. My biological mother. I'd heard my foster mother, Ellen, mention her a few times, but always with a tone of contempt, as if she were an irresponsible woman who'd abandoned me. But the face in this photo didn't look like that kind of person. She looked fragile, like someone carrying a world of pain. "You need to know the truth," Grandpa continued, his voice heavy. "But first, let me tell you the story from the beginning." He paused, looking out the window at the dim streetlights in the Omaha night. "Over 30 years ago, I worked as a driver for a wealthy family in Denver. They were rich, powerful, but full of drama, the kind of family stories I used to tell you about. The woman in the photo, her name was Clara, was the eldest daughter of that family. A bright, beautiful heiress, but her heart belonged to a man her family didn't approve of." I listened, feeling like I was falling into a story that didn't belong to me. Grandpa explained that Clara had fallen in love with a poor man, a wandering musician named David. He had a charming smile and big dreams. But Clara's family saw him as a gold digger. When Clara became pregnant, her family was furious. They disowned her, cut off all contact, leaving her alone with a baby on the way. David, the man Clara had put all her trust in, abandoned her too, when he realized he couldn't gain anything from her wealthy family. Clara was left in despair, homeless, without family, with only an unborn child, me. "Clara came to me in her darkest days," Grandpa said, his eyes clouding as if reliving the memory. She'd been kicked out by her parents, living in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of Denver, working part-time at a coffee shop to survive. I'd stopped by to check on her after work, and we grew close. She told me about her dreams, about wanting to give her child a better life, but she knew she couldn't do it. "Not then." He paused, his voice catching. "When you were born, Clara begged me for help. She said she needed time to rebuild her life, to become a mother worthy of you. She asked me to take you in." My chest felt heavy. I looked at the photo, trying to picture this woman, my mother, in those lonely, painful days. "So what did you do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Grandpa lowered his head, his hands clenching together. At the time, my son, your foster father Robert, and Ellen had been married for a few years but hadn't had children. I convinced them to adopt you. I thought it was the best way to give you a home, a family. I was wrong. He paused, his eyes filled with regret. I didn't expect them to treat you the way they did. I thought they'd love you like their own, but every time I saw them push you away, it broke my heart. I looked back at the photo. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pity, or just emptiness. What about my real mother? I asked, my voice faltering. Where did she go? Grandpa picked up the business card from the table and handed it to me. Clara is a successful woman now, he said. After leaving you, she left Denver, started over. She went to college, built a career, and now she's an entrepreneur in Seattle. She's been looking for you for over 10 years. Recently, she found me. She wants to meet you, Adam, but she's afraid of disrupting your life. She wants you to decide. I took the business card and read the name. Clara Thornton, CEO, Thornton Enterprises. An address in Seattle. A phone number. I turned the card over, feeling like I was holding a piece of myself. Then I opened the letter, recognizing the soft, slanting handwriting. Dear Adam, it began. I don't know if you'll ever want to hear from me, but I've never stopped thinking about you. I stopped, feeling like my breath was caught in my chest. I glanced at Grandpa, sitting across from me, his frail hands clasped tightly, his eyes a mix of worry and patience. I knew he was waiting, watching to see how I'd react to the truth just revealed. I took a deep breath and continued reading. I'm writing this letter hoping that one day you'll read it, though I'm not sure if you'll want to hear from me. I made the biggest mistake of my life leaving you. But please believe it wasn't because I didn't love you. You were my light, the only thing that a girl disowned by my family, abandoned by the man I loved, had. I had nothing but my love for you. But I knew I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Henry, your grandfather, was the only one who didn't turn his back on me. He promised to take care of you, and I trusted him. I left not because I wanted to forget you, but because I wanted to become a mother you could be proud of. I went to college, worked day and night, and now I've built a stable life. But not a single day has passed without me thinking of you, wondering how you're living, if you're happy. I've been searching for you for over 10 years. But every time I think about meeting you, I'm afraid. Afraid you'll resent me. Afraid I'll disrupt your life. If you're reading this letter, I only ask for a chance to explain, to say the apology I've held in my heart for 29 years. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope one day you'll understand. I love you, Adam. I always have. Your mother, Clara Thornton. I folded the letter, tears silently streaming down my cheeks. I didn't know why I was crying, for Clara's pain, for the years I grew up in the cold indifference of my foster family, or for the feeling of having found a piece of myself, yet fearing it might break me. I looked at the photo in my hand, Clara's face, her blue eyes so much like mine. I tried to imagine her in those days, a young woman alone, holding me on her last night before entrusting me to Grandpa. I didn't know what to feel, anger, pity, or just an indescribable void. Grandpa, I said, my voice choked. What do I do now? I placed the letter on the table, looking at him, searching for an answer, a direction. Should I meet her, or forget this and keep living as if I never knew? Grandpa took my hand, his trembling but warm. Adam, he said, his voice low and gentle. I can't decide for you. This truth belongs to you, and only you know what your heart is telling you. I just want you to remember one thing. No matter how difficult the path you choose, you're never alone. I'll always be here, and Clara, she's waiting for you too. I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and love he'd given me all these years. He wasn't just my grandfather. He was the one who kept his promise to Clara, who sheltered me when the world turned its back. I took a deep breath, feeling a decision forming in my heart. I want to meet her, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I want to go to Seattle. I need to see what she's like now, and I need to hear her story from her own lips. Grandpa smiled, a smile of both pride and relief. Then do what feels right, kiddo. But before you go, is there anything else you want to do? Anything you need to settle before stepping into this new chapter? I thought for a moment. Then an idea sparked. I want to stop by my foster parents' house, I said, my voice low but resolute. I want to tell them about this, not to argue or blame, but to let them know I found a part of myself. I want them to understand that I'm no longer the adopted kid they can ignore. Grandpa nodded, a glint of resolve in his eyes. All right, Adam, I'll go with you. Whatever happens, I'll be there. We left the restaurant, my mind still reeling from Clara's letter. The Omaha night was cold, the wind sending a shiver through me. But Grandpa's presence beside me made me feel grounded. We climbed into his old pickup truck, the familiar smell of motor oil and wood reminding me of summers at the farm. You sure about this, Adam? He asked as he started the engine. Facing them won't be easy. I'm sure, I replied, though a part of me was still afraid. I didn't know how my foster parents would react, but I knew I needed to do this, not to prove anything, but to close one chapter of my life before opening the next. We drove through Omaha's familiar streets, past houses glowing with Thanksgiving lights. Families gathered together. When we pulled up to the grand 2-story house of my foster parents, my heart pounded. Lights spilled from the living room, and I heard Hannah's laughter, Eric's lively chatter. They were still celebrating as if my dinner had never existed. I stepped out of the truck, Grandpa by my side. I knocked on the door, and when my foster mother, Ellen, opened it, her eyes flickered with surprise before settling back into their familiar coldness. Adam, she said, her voice flat. What brings you here so late? I need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to everyone. She hesitated but opened the door wider. I stepped inside, Grandpa following, and saw my foster father, Robert, in his armchair. Eric and Hannah were eating pumpkin pie on the sofa. They looked at me, but no one stood to greet me. What's this about, Adam? Robert asked, his tone slightly irritated, as if I were an inconvenience. I took a deep breath, feeling Grandpa's hand rest lightly on my shoulder. I just learned the truth about my biological mother, I said, my voice firm but tinged with emotion. She's alive, and I'm going to Seattle to meet her. I just wanted you all to know because I've called you family for 29 years. Silence enveloped the room. Hannah stopped chewing, her eyes flickering with unease. Eric smirked, as if about to make a snide remark, but Grandpa's stern look silenced him. Ellen crossed her arms, her gaze icy. Is that so? She said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You think finding your real mother will change anything? You're still just the adopted kid, Adam. Don't get any illusions. Her words cut like a knife. But this time, I didn't let them bring me down. I'm not delusional.